and she knew her life would never be the same. We focus on that person on that far left, that servant sitting there, completely baffled by what was happening in front of her, knowing as a servant, as a slave, what that felt like and how it felt to be treated and considered and looked down upon as a slave or a servant. I'd like to read another version of John 13, 3 through 17. This again is from, we use this often from the Message. Jesus knew that the Father had put him in complete charge of everything, that he came from God and was on his way back to God. So he got up from the supper table, set aside his robe, and put on an apron. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the feet of the disciples, drying them with his apron. When he got to Simon Peter, Peter said, "Master, you wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You don't understand now what I'm doing, but it will be clearer to you later." Peter persisted, "You're not going to wash my feet ever." Jesus said, "If I don't wash you, you can't be part of what I'm doing." "Master," said Peter, "not only my feet then, wash my hands, wash my head." Jesus said, "If you've had a bath in the morning, you only need your feet washed now, and you're clean from head to toe. My concern, you understand, is holiness, not hygiene. So now you're clean, but not every one of you." He knew who was betraying him. That's why he said, "Not every one of you." After he had finished and washed their feet, he took his robe and put it back on and went back to his place at the table. Then he said, "Do you understand what I have done to you? You address me as teacher and master, and rightly so. That is what I am. So if I, the master and teacher, washed your feet, you must now wash each other's feet. I've laid down a pattern for you. What I've done, you do. I'm only pointing out the obvious. A servant is not ranked above his master. An employee doesn't give orders to the employer. If you understand what I'm telling you, act like it and live a blessed life." If you understand what I'm telling you, Jesus says, act like it, and then live a blessed life. Do you wonder about that? Do you wonder how blessed lives are? Do you feel like maybe your life has been blessed? I had a friend in college. He was actually one of the assistant professors, and he would always say, "I've had such a blessed life." And he had. He was very good looking. About anything that he tried, he was successful at. Just ran across this beautiful, really cool cabin that he had that just happened to come up for rent right before he happened to hear about it, So it was one of those things that, like, every little thing that he seemed like he had, like, the Midas touch, right? Now, I haven't kept up with him. I did run across him at an ordination for Vicki Rankins Anderson, a couple years ago. But I always remember thinking about that, was he like super blessed, or was it just like his attitude of feeling blessed, and working hard and being grateful for all that he had. So I don't know, some of us sometimes feel like, we never catch a break, right? We have such bad luck. And then sometimes do we kind of look at that and step back and go, well, or is it the choices I'm making? Is it my attitude, maybe? But yet at the same time, I think we all can think of a number of people that have had a rough time, no matter what it is. You can think about these people and go, wow, one thing after another, it's just, wow, oh my goodness, right? I had another friend in college that she, it just seemed like bad luck just followed her everywhere. And in fact, we would, she would just say that right away. Well, of course, this is going to, happen, whatever. And then I remember always feeling so bad. And then sometimes I would go, well, she didn't have to go to that party where she, probably got drunk, where this probably then, happened, and then she lost her keys and this and that, So I think it's so interesting how we can look at luck or not luck, blessings or not blessings, right? And kind of try to look at all of that. Are these lessons that God is trying to teach? Are these bad choices? Which again, doesn't mean that we judge people for that, right? Because who hasn't made bad choices? But then how do we help people then make maybe the more life-affirming choices? And what is the stuff that just is dumb luck, right? That you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And there, things happen. So we look at all of these different ways that we are to live. And I think one of the most important things then is that we look at that no matter what's happening in our lives, if we can be a blessing to others, we are blessed. No matter what else is happening in our lives, we are blessed from being able to be of service to others. So we think about it, Jesus and his disciples have been out, they're home after a tense day in Jerusalem. Jesus, kind of keeps alluding to his death, which would be unnerving to say the least, right, for the disciples, because they don't know what's going to happen. So after a day in the dirty streets of Jerusalem, one of them is assigned the task, right, of getting a basin of water so that they can wash the feet of their friends. But again, the disciples are pretty caught up, I would imagine, in kind of what's happening, that no one really maybe bothers to take over this menial task until Jesus takes this towel and basin and goes about cleaning up their smelly feet. Peter, embarrassed again by the fact maybe that he didn't think to do it himself, attempts to stop Jesus from washing his feet, but Jesus rebuffs Peter, right, and says that it's not only okay for Jesus to take care of that task, that menial task, but it's necessary. So Jesus is defining his understanding of leadership. I think I've mentioned this before, but one of the things that shaped me as a pastor, and again, I'm not saying, yay me, but one of the things you kind of look as you are, it took me, 14 years to go through seminary, part-time, one class at a time. So I had lots of time to work with lots of pastors, and I had lots of pastors that were incredible mentors that I would see how they would treat people or handle situations and go, wow, if I ever make it that far, I'm a pastor, I hope I can be like that. But at the same time, I also worked with a pastor who I remember, and I was an organist at the time of this church, that was not particularly helpful, and something would go wrong, whatever, and I would stick my head into their door, which is where they kind of lived in their office, and that was all they stayed at, was just in their office the entire Sunday morning, and most throughout the week was just right there. And I would stick my head in it, this happened, or whatever, we don't have enough chairs, or the heating system went out, or this or that. Oh, okay, well, I hope they get it fixed. And again, I kept thinking, you do need time to pray for God. To kind of, God, help me be, saying your words today as I'm preaching. So it is important. And sometimes I don't get that time here because I'm kind of running around saying hi to everybody, whatever. So maybe, that's a lack for me. But at the same time, at that moment, I was like, gosh darn it, I'm the organist, and here I go, and the custodian and I would go and set up chairs, and we would go do whatever. And I just remember thinking that I really want to be very involved when I'm a pastor, and that I don't want to just be sitting back and going, oh yeah, well, let's just let the other people do it. Because the implication was that's beneath me to go and set up chairs, okay? So again, maybe I was misreading his situation. But we see all these different situations that we can learn from, right? Of what is the kind of person we want to be? What's the kind of pastor I want to be? What's the kind of neighbor that you want to be? What's the kind of employer that you want to be? What's the kind of grandparent or parent that you want to be? And so Jesus defined his understanding of leadership when he said, the Son of Man has come not to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus is saying if you really want to make a difference in the world, if you really want to be a leader, it won't be by getting others to do what you want. It'll be by putting the needs of others before your own. And again, that's so difficult, isn't it? Because that's just opposite of what our world tells us, right? To be successful, you have all these underlings that rush around to do your bidding, right? And you have the fancy car, and you have this and that. But Jesus modeled this servant leadership, by washing the feet of the disciples, but then right after that, paid the ultimate price of a servant leader to give up his life for the ones he served. And remember, Jesus says that night, he says, "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. But now I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet. You also should wash another's feet. I have set an example that you should follow." So if you think about that, what are some of the things that you would fill in the blank, right? Jesus has done this for us, so now we should blank. Well, washing each other's feet would certainly be one, but again, we know that is just one example, right? What are the other ways that we can serve each other? And I know it's hard because we go, you know what? Yeah, Pastor, I want to, sign me up for all the dirty, smelly, yucky jobs that no one else wants to do. Yeah, that's what I want to do, right? That's the first thing I think of. Hey, let's go to join a church so that I can do all these things that are either disgusting or smelly or things that, I just really have no interest in doing, right? I want to go, change diapers, in the nursery or clean up the basement after a church dinner or the kids' events. Or, I want to go, let's see, I'm going to take a week off of work and lose pay and then pay for my own flight to go down to Back Bay Mission. And then, I have to pay for my living lodging there. And then work all week for other people. Is that what our world tells us to do? It's the opposite, right? No, they should pay you if you're going to go down and help them, right? But it's a complete upside down, right? A turning upside down of all of our worldly expectations if we are a servant leader, if we are a servant disciple. And I don't think he does that to make the disciples feel guilty. I mean, I don't remember ever Jesus doing a guilt trip. I think he just did it to model them this lifestyle that has the potential of changing lives, not just of the people you're serving, but of those who are serving, right? Jesus is calling them to experience the real joy of a Christian life, a joy that comes from being God's servants in the world. And the most joyous people that I have ever met are those who have learned the secret of being servants. I've met some people that are fun, right? And they seem pretty happy, and maybe they just kind of do their own thing, and it's all I, me, I, and they all kind of do their own thing, and so they're pretty happy because they do live for themselves, right? But I'm talking that deep-seated joy that so few of us have. The people that I have found that in have learned the secrets of being servants, and not just serving because you feel like you have to or Jesus guilts you into it, but serving out of a deep love and care for other people. That's the pathway to joy and to real significance in this life. And as we continue and get older, right, don't we see just how quickly that life goes, right? And do I want to live it for myself and for my own needs, or do I want to live it for others? I don't know if you know Henry Nouwen. So here's a picture of Henry Nouwen. He's no longer living, a Catholic priest who has written many, many books. Several of his devotionals are in the back there. I still see them, I think, back there in that little bin. So some of you maybe have read a Henry Nouwen book or devotional over the years. He was very, very respected. He ended up teaching at places like Notre Dame and Yale and Harvard. So he was no lightweight. Okay, he was up there in the spiritual, not the spiritual. I mean, who am I to say that? But in the theologian, famous theologians and writers and thinkers and godly men. He averaged authoring one book a year for many years. They were bestsellers. He was in demand as a speaker and traveled all around the world giving lectures. He had a resume to die for, which was actually the problem. The pressing schedule and relentless competition were suffocating his own spiritual life. It reminds me a little bit about Richard Rohr. Do you remember him? We talked about Richard Rohr and his kind of a place of spiritual renewal that he has out in New Mexico. He's still living, but it was his readings and books that we had talked about in Advent. So those of you who read those books kind of know a similar kind of a story as Henry Nouwen. But anyway, so back to Henry Nouwen. So Henry Nouwen finally, he took 6 months off and went to work with the poor in South America. But then when he returned back to the States, he jumped back into his schedule of teaching and writing and speaking. And finally, he took some time off and he went to work in France at L'Arche, at home for the severely mentally retarded. And he felt so nourished by them that he agreed to become priest in residence at a similar home in Toronto called Daybreak. And so there, Nouwen spent his last 10 years writing and traveling to speak here and there, but always returning and spending most of his time in the haven at Daybreak, this home for the severely mentally impaired. Author Philip Yancey, maybe some of you have read some of his books, he went to visit Nouwen when he was at Daybreak. Yancey had lunch with him in his small room. Henry Nouwen's room had a single bed, one bookshelf, and a few pieces of Shaker-style furniture. The walls were unadorned except for a print of a Van Gogh painting and a few religious symbols. No computer, no calendar posted on the wall. In this room, Philip Yancey says, Nouwen had found serenity. After lunch, Nouwen celebrated a special Eucharist for Adam. Adam was a young man that Nouwen, or the young man that Nouwen looked after. With solemnity and also a twinkle in his eye, Nouwen led the liturgy in honor of Adam's 26th birthday. Unable to talk, walk, or dress himself, profoundly impaired, Adam gave no sign of comprehension. He seemed to recognize at least that his family had come. He drooled throughout the ceremony and grunted loudly a few times. Later, Nouwen told me, this is Philip Yancey, it took him nearly 2 hours to prepare Adam each day, bathing and shaving him, brushing his teeth, combing his hair, guiding his hand as he tried to eat breakfast. These simple, repetitive acts had become for him almost like an hour of meditation. Yancey raised the subject of whether this was the best way that Nouwen could use his incredible gifts, was spending time here with one person. Couldn't they, asked Yancey, find a servant to do all this menial stuff? At which point Nouwen responded, I am not giving up anything, he insisted. It is I, not Adam, who gets the main benefit from our friendship. Isn't it amazing when we can hear these stories of people who are giving of themselves, of giving of their time? And yes, they do get something from it as well, but that they are learning again that life is much bigger than themselves, whether it's their joys or their problems, right? That life is much bigger than that. Jesus knew something about being a leader, about how to affect the world around us, and he modeled that type of leadership for us the night that he washed his disciples' dirty feet. So we have the choice to react, right? We can look at others in judgment, like our woman here was kind of looking like, what is going on? Maybe it's not judgment. Maybe it's bewilderment. What is he doing? That's not how the world is set up. He's in position of power. He should be sitting up here, and I should be wiping everybody else's feet. I'm just lowly. We can look at people in judgment, or we can look at what needs to be done. But we also can do one other thing that's not healthy, right? We can make sure that everyone else knows what we're doing, right? Did you see that, how I washed everybody's feet? Look at how I put myself less. Look how humble I am, right? Obviously, our Lord Jesus has given us the example to go quietly, lovingly, humbly, serving each other. And that's where true contentment and joy will be found. May it be so. Amen. One of the things, as we mentioned with our prayer